So June 4th, 1996 was the maiden voyage of the Ariane 5. This is a rocket that was destined to propel Europe to the top of the commercial space industry. $7 billion in development, $500 million for the rocket and its cargo, and they took the software from the Ariane 4. Had redundant inertial reference systems, redundant onboard computers that took data from those inertial reference systems. Those computers controlled the boosters and the main engine. The code they borrowed from the Ariane 4 was the inertial reference system code. And what they didn't realize is that there's some differences between the Ariane 4 and the Ariane 5. For one, there was a pre-flight alignment routine that ran for the Ariane 4, but it wasn't necessary for the Ariane 5. They ran it anyway. The trajectory of the Ariane 5 differed a lot from the Ariane 4 also. So one of the values of that pre-flight alignment caused an operand error. They tried to take a 64-bit float and put it into a 16-bit integer field. That threw an error. The inertial reference systems, both of them, suffered this operand error, shut down, dumped their diagnostic data. That diagnostic data went to the onboard computers, and that diagnostic data was interpreted as flight data. In order to compensate for that flight data, the onboard computers deflected the boosters and the main engine as far as they could go to try to correct the path of the rocket, and the aerodynamic forces tore the solid rocket boosters off of the rocket. I couldn't find a quote for oops because I can't really attribute that to anybody. So thankfully, one thing worked. At 37 seconds into the launch, it detected that the craft had broken apart, so it self-destructed. And they went back to the drawing board to repair a few of those software errors. These sorts of things happen. We've been talking a lot about Agile today, and these things happen because we're not thinking through some of these processes. They copied and pasted a lot of this Ariane software code without knowing whether they should run it or should not run it, and as a result, they lost this rocket. I'm Ed Buhain. I work for Excella Consulting. I'm a Microsoft developer, so I have a Microsoft certified solutions developer and certified professional developer certifications. I'm working on my second solutions developer certification. I'm also a certified Scrum professional, and I'm a PMP. So I have a little bit of the project management experience mixed in, but I still think I'm just a developer. My goal is really to help you get better about coding. We have a lot of these Agile processes that we're learning about, and they're all really great, but a lot of our work still comes down to what we as developers can build. So this is called Unindented Code Cannot Possibly Work. I was at a conference to see Jeff Procease writes a lot of Microsoft software and does a lot of the training from writing for Microsoft Windows. And I went to one of his presentations. He was typing into a text editor, just some sample code for a technology. It's probably obsolete by now. And he was showing us what he did for the Burton Snowboard website. And as he was typing in his sample code, he noticed that some of it wasn't indented properly. And right before he ran his demo, he said, wait a minute, hold on 1 second. I'm going to fix this up and clean this up for you, because we all know that unindented code cannot possibly work. And that was the inspiration for this presentation. Does anyone here watch reality TV, Hell's Kitchen?
Yeah.
So I see some nodding. Gordon Ramsay has, I guess, a high standard in his kitchen. And if you haven't seen the show, it's a lot of people in a kitchen trying to serve food in a restaurant. Gordon Ramsay gets really upset, uses a lot of colorful expletives to describe the quality of the food that comes from these chefs that are supposedly trained and know how to cook food. He gets really mad at these people. He throws the plates at them. He's upset because we have perfectly trained chefs that know how to make a lobster risotto or a pea risotto or whatever they're trying to make, but they still bring something they know is not good up to the pass. And we need to stop doing that as software developers. We know a lot of best practices. We're learning a lot of good processes. Solid principles, for instance. These are the solid principles for object-oriented design. SOLID has just been mnemonic for us. Single responsibility. Everything that we write, each object should have only one function. The open and close principle. We want things to be open for expansion and extension, but closed for modification. Liskov substitution. We want to be able to replace an object with a subtype. And we would have some arguments about, is a circle an ellipse or is an ellipse a circle? Because of that discussion. Interface segregation. We want to have client-specific interfaces, more than one client-specific interface if we need to, as opposed to one big interface that's generalized. And dependency inversion. We want to make sure that we're dealing with abstractions as opposed to concretions. So we have all these different principles that we follow, all these best practices. And we also have what we call the code smells or the practice smells, or things that just don't seem right. And so to be great software developers, we kind of have to take these best practices, our ability to identify these code smells and put them together so we know when something needs improvement or if we've got it right. A lot of things we've been talking about with test-driven development, continuous integration, continuous deployment, all these things are there as support for us to catch these things if we happen to make these errors. But we still don't want to have to make the error and have something else catch it for us. So talking about software craftsmanship for a minute, it's interesting that we choose craftsmanship as the word for it. I've done a little bit with woodworking, and that's another area where you might hear people talk about craftsmanship. How do you know if something is good? How do you know if a piece of furniture is good? You might look at the materials it's made out of. You might look at the joinery. Here we have a dovetail. It takes a lot more effort to put a dovetail, but it works much better as a joint than, well, what I have in my house with all my IKEA furniture. It's more like dowels and luck that holds everything together. The same thing goes for our software. People are going to look at how we put it together. They're going to look at the materials that we use. They're going to look at our code and the process to see what the final product looks like. Sometimes we expect things to be in a certain place. If you went into a really nice house, if you're looking to buy a house in a really nice neighborhood and you saw this, you'd probably think it was a little out of place. Same thing goes if you go in a really bad neighborhood and a really ugly house and you find a really nice kitchen, that's probably going to stand out as kind of weird to you too. So when Jeff Procease, in his demo, chose to take a minute, indent his code and clean it up for us, that told me a lot about his presentation. It told me a lot about Jeff Procease, the software developer. Suddenly I have this greater expectation that all the stuff he's going to put together is probably going to work pretty well because for something throwaway, he still took the time to make it good for us. You know, actually I rate the presentation quality at these large conferences. If you've ever been to these conferences, there may be 25, 30 different sessions going on at one time. So a lot of people kind of get up and move around. Have you ever been to a demo that didn't work? Yeah. Yeah, the best one for me was one where the guy actually said, the cardinal rule of demos is never restart your computer in the demo. And he was trying to show how he could boot from a virtual disk. And so he changed his entire configuration. He said, I'm going to violate the cardinal rule of demos. He shut that thing off and it never came back on, and everybody walked out of his room. Jeff Procease started with a crowd that filled the room, and by the end he had gained about 50%, and it was filled, and that's the kind of demo and the kind of work that he puts together. So when we put together something, people are going to judge us, whether it's artwork, whether it's software. They're going to take a look at these things again, the materials, the process we use to put them together, how good it looks in the end. So one of the partners of Excella, I'm giving him credit for this quote, and I'm not sure if he's the one who came up with it first. He says, success is dependent on people, process, and technology in that order. So we know how to code. We know how to put together our software. We're learning all these Agile processes. We know what it takes to put together, but people still comes first. And that's why I want you to become great developers. It's great that we'll have the checks and balances for the process. It's great that we have technology to help us through it, but don't ever become reliant on those. You know, when I conduct interviews, went with Sahil on an interview the other week, and I kind of realized at that point that I've probably done a few hundred interviews in my lifetime, but I never have told anybody what it is I'm doing in the interview or why I ask certain questions. And I started thinking there's 3 different things that I start looking for in these interviews. If I'm looking for somebody that's a good software developer, I can't take it like it's a house. I can't look at a kitchen and say, okay, the plumbing is working and the electrical is working. You can't do that with a software developer. I don't know how to translate that. So there's 3 different things that I look for. First one is passion. How many of you actually like what you do? Good. Most of the hands in the room came up. I don't think you can be a successful software developer if you really don't like what you're doing. I don't know if anyone's ever hired one of those professional cleaning services. And I fired my second professional cleaning service in 2 years the other week. The reason I don't like them is because when they clean my house, they have one mission, that is to clean everything that they see in the entire house. They don't clean my house the same way that I would clean my house. They'll move everything around, so when I get home, everything's going to be somewhere between 3 inches and 20 feet away from where it started. Fixtures that are things I consider to be fixtures that are glued or screwed into the wall, they might tear those down so they can clean underneath those and show how thorough a job they did. And the difference is that I'm the one who owns the house. I'm the one who's passionate about my house not burning down or leaving the refrigerator door closed or leaving the gas off or things that the cleaning services don't seem to get right when I hire them. So I ask a lot of these questions in the interview to see whether someone really likes coding. I ask some, people say I ask some strange questions, and really I'm just trying to find out if someone's passionate about computers or computing. I'll ask, do you play computer games? How many computers do you have at home? Oh, do you have a server at home? Do you have virtual machines at home? Is it because I want to connect with them on Xbox Live? Maybe not. I just want to see how involved someone is with technology. I say the best software developers are the ones who are sitting at work coding software all day, and they get to the end of the night, maybe it's 8:45 and they work really late. They're going to crawl home, eat a little bit, and they get right back on the computer because that's what they like to do anyway. Maybe they're not going to work on the stuff they worked on during the day, but that shows that that's someone that still loves software development. Communication is the second thing that I look for. And as developers, we have a few different types of communication that we might need. I saw Greg Boer, who is a product manager for TFS at Microsoft. And he says that developers are really bad when it comes to verbal communication, and I kind of agree with him. Have you ever gone through and estimated a pretty large project, whether you're Agile or not? Maybe you got into a room together, discussed what it was you're going to build, and you come out of the room and you say, we know that we're going to be done in about 6 months. So you look at the calendar, it's December 7th today, so we should be done with our software maybe somewhere in the middle of June, right? So we then tell that to the product owner maybe. say, hey, Dohan, we're going to be done somewhere in June. Dohan's going to say, great. Well, you know what? If they work a little harder, maybe it'll be done right at the end of May. I'm going to tell them Memorial Day. Product owner runs off, tells somebody else and say, oh yeah, we're going to be done in May. That person adds their own little thing saying, okay, that's great. So May, well, they really mean April if they work really hard. And then the CEO will say, well, April's nice and everything, but it would be really great if we could get it done in March. Do you think you guys can get it done in March? Sure, we can get it done in March. 2 minutes later, after you came out of this meeting, people are coming back to you and saying, okay, well, since we're releasing in February, we need to be code complete by January 1. I guess developers are pretty bad when it comes to that. And we need to have the right conviction, and we also need to be very clear when we speak verbally. But maybe not all of us do as much verbal communication. We might do written communication. This is probably hard to read from the back. This is an example of a resume that I got. I actually cleaned up the format, I changed the name, but most of the computer skills on here are the way they were. I don't know if you can see this terribly well. It says MS SQL Server 2005. They spelled it S-E-Q-U-E-L. I'm not even making this up. And that's great. And I can see how you might make a mistake like this because we always say SQL Server. I don't say SQL Server. But if somebody's worked with the technology and they can't even spell it correctly, does this person have any hope of actually getting this job? He might be really good at it too, but I'm not going to believe in that because of this one little thing. There's another form of written communication that we're all familiar with, and Martin Fowler had some comments on that. Any fool can write code that a computer can understand. Good programmers write code that humans can understand. So for most of us, our work product is the code that we write. We're not going to be sitting next to the user every time they run the software we wrote. It's up to our applications, it's up to that user experience to tell the users, to tell our bosses how good our software is. I went through my archives. Every time I see some particularly bad code, I tend to keep track of that because I want to go back and make sure I never do that kind of bad code again. And I try to refresh it as often as I can, but some of the ones I have in the archive are already clear winners. I want to share some of those. See if you can pick out the code smells when you see these. So, first one, this is from Visual Basic 6, about 10 years ago. Here we are actually populating a list of products. What this developer did is they created a little label for the entire screen and kind of created his own grid. He copied and pasted this block, it was 99 times. Well, I guess he copied it once and pasted 98 times. I guess he didn't know that we had these things called control arrays in Visual Basic. Or maybe he didn't pick out that if you're copying and pasting, or if you see the exact same code over and over again with one little tiny difference, maybe there's a better way to do that. This is a transact SQL query. This is, for those of you that know me, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. And I think somewhere along the line, people were trained to always create an alias when they're working with T-SQL. I'm not sure where that came from, but people have told me, yeah, you know what, somebody told me I'm supposed to do that. Just because we have a feature in transact SQL to rename a column or rename a table doesn't mean we should take a perfectly named table or perfectly named column and obfuscate it into something I can't understand. This is actually a simplified query. I cleaned this up a little bit. We have customers, addresses, orders, I kind of like those table names. I know what those are. Then you change to A, B, C. If you imagine if you have 12, 13 different tables and they're all aliased, suddenly I'm looking at this huge equation that says where D dot P equals X dot Q. And I can't deal with that. We talked a little bit at lunchtime about commenting. Is it good or bad to have comments? This is kind of the base case for this. Is this code correct? Or is, well, are we supposed to increment J? Or are we supposed to increment I? I don't know. So the problem, I prefer sparse commenting. The reason being that you don't know if it's the comment that's wrong or if it's the code that's wrong. Another thing is, I'm not sure who's on the development team that this guy was involved with, but that if you don't know how to increment I or that I++ means increment, then maybe you should find some better team members as opposed to having a comment that kind of line. I prefer sparse commenting, so I avoid things like this. I think the argument is that if you have a sufficiently difficult section of code or block of code, then maybe you need to clarify that. But looking at that in an Agile sense, that's probably a candidate for refactoring anyway. So maybe you can put something in that says, hey, we need to come back and clean up this code. But I still prefer being able to read the code as opposed to having to read a comment to tell me what the code is really supposed to do. And so we kind of conglomerate a lot of different things into this one. When I was in college, it was right around the .com boom time. I was a TA for one of the computer science classes at UVA. And the grading system was interesting in that 50% of the score had to do with whether the code worked or not. The other 50% had to do with things like naming, spacing, indentation. So there are people that had completely working pieces of code that got their labs back or their papers back, and they got a 50, they got an F on it, and they didn't understand why. And it's because I wasn't the guy compiling the code, I was just reading the code to see if I could understand it. And the same thing's going to happen to us. Maybe it's going to happen to our own code if we look at it 6 months later and have no idea why we did something. It's probably happened to everybody in this room. But the reason why we're applying these standards, the reason why we want to avoid these code smells and put all these technologies in place to get rid of them is so that we don't end up with something like this. I wanted to point out this, else clause, WIAT for orders. I guess we're waiting for orders, but we're in a hurry for those. You have to be careful with your tools also. 10 years ago, we didn't have these things like Microsoft IntelliSense or the other equivalents that will automatically look up the name of something and fill it in for you. And the problem with the tools that we have is if you misspell something once, the tool will fill in the incorrect spelling from that point forward. You have to have a low tolerance for these sorts of things, because I've seen production code where you'll have something misspelled throughout the entire application hundreds of times. And I wonder to myself, has anyone seen this? And does anyone else wonder if we should have WIAT for order slip in our code base? What are you going to think? If you saw this, what would you think of the rest of the software? It could be great, but this is enough to kind of sour the entire deal for you. So speaking of tools, I also want to make sure that candidates know how to use their tools and how to use their techniques. A lot of times people kind of misuse their tools, or they have these tools and they forget to use them. Going back to my house, I also have bad luck with contractors as compared to cleaning people. I've yet to hire a contractor to come and work on my house that either owns or knows how to use a level. So if you go into my house, you see a lot of different things that are a little bit off. And if I have time, I'll go back and I'll redo the work that I paid someone else to do in my own house. Or if you look around carefully, you'll find the places where I have yet to go in and fix all the outlets that are at a really odd angle. Same thing goes in software development. We have lots of awesome tools available to us, but you can't let the tools control you. You have to take control of those tools and let them make things easier for you. So this guy that became self-aware, that clearly wasn't the case of someone knowing how to use HTTP properly. So Mike McGar was talking about source control for a little bit, version control systems. And some are better than others, we know that. But I think in all cases, the source control systems, except for copying to a separate folder, will keep track of who made what changes and when. And if yours doesn't, then okay, you might need to do something like this. But how many of you have seen something like this where someone's putting a lot of commentary on a specific case inside the code? This sort of thing is what I expect my source control tool to do. Sometimes a lot of people will comment out an entire section of code. In theory, you should be able to go back to a previous version to get the code that was there. But this is the case where people aren't knowing how to use their tools. Do you ever see anyone that comments, like, you're instructed to put sound of text at the top of every single file? I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I did work with somebody who did stuff like this. His name was Doug, but I don't think his last initial was H. But I remember looking into the code and seeing random remarks about his personal life. Which is great, but it had nothing to do with the code. So now we have social networks, so maybe you can keep those open in a different window, and we don't have to check it into the system like that. ORMs are fun too. This is just a reminder that misspellings in your database will also propagate into your code if you were to use an ORM tool to pull those things through. When we're talking about tools and techniques, I think presentation is something that we forget to think about a lot of times. I've been taking a lot more interest in design and human interaction design and paying attention to UX and my UIs of late. And it's because you might have really great back-end code, but maybe you didn't put together your page until the last minute. And so people don't really see the full extent of what you build. I don't know if anyone's ever been shopping for Rolexes or fine watches or jewelry before, or if you've been to one of those stores where they come out and the guy's in the really nice suit. It's like, oh, you'd like to see the Rolex? No problem. Takes out the big black felt cloth, lays it all out in front of you, the lights are shining down, and he presents it to you. This is your Rolex. What do you think? And you think, wow, that's really expensive, that's really fancy, maybe it's more than I can afford. What if you had the exact same watch and you're on the streets in Northeast DC and a guy in a trench coat said, hey, you want to buy a Rolex? It could be the exact same product, but I'm probably not going to buy that one. There's something about that presentation that put me off. So some of you know the answer to this. This is a door in Excella's office, which is up on the 6th floor. My question for you guys is, which way does that door open? So it opens only one way, and it opens outward. Those of you who know about the fire codes know that in buildings like this, we need to make sure that people can get out and push in the case of fire. But that's a lot of effort to think about when all you really want to know is whether I'm supposed to push or pull to get in. we're used to door handles having a certain configuration. The doors we have in this room are horizontal. That implies that we're going to push them out. If they were vertical, we would think that we would pull them open. If I saw this door normally, I'd expect it to open both ways because it has the same handle on both sides. In this case, that's not really the case. In fact, when we first moved into this office, one of the partners, Steve Cooper, I noticed was looking up every time he walked up to one of these doors. And you really can't see it, but there's a tiny little stopper that keeps the door from opening the other way. And that's what he was looking for, so that he didn't make a fool of himself when he tries to pull or push the wrong way. So we already got together a minute ago and we got to meet each other. So let's do this, a similar exercise. Find somebody next to you. If there's an odd number, get into trios. All I need you to think of is something that you think is poorly designed and share that with the other people in your group. We only have 1.5 minutes for that. So let's do that. If you're still sharing your group, it's too big. All right, who thinks they have the best one? All right, go for it.
So the blind design is such a way that we don't have any option to see outside. And that's a blind. That's the reason they put the blind. Like, no option to see something.
That's true.
Just pull down on it and it comes up. Concentrate.
Yeah, that's true. Now I'm feeling upset about the blinds, and I wasn't. Anything else? Any major design issues people have noticed? Yes?
The front seat of my Honda fits poorly designed. You can't adjust it. It's a small car, I'm a small person, but I can't adjust it enough so that I can sit comfortably in it. And if I drive for more than 15 minutes, I end up with a knee cramp and a neck cramp.
Then, okay, they don't even have adjustable seats in it?
The seat's adjustable, but it's not adjustable enough.
Got
I
it.
have enough different ways.
So they forgot about the ergonomics when they put that thing together.
Yes.
Yeah, so the reason I put this in here is because I wanted to share my pet peeve. Some people who work with me know what I'm about to say. I have the very laptop I'm using right now has a function key on it because on a laptop you have all these special hotkeys. And so I'm used to this control function Windows Alt layout on my keyboard. Now, Lenovo makes some that are function control Windows Alt. Now, I do a lot of, well, for documents, not necessarily code, but I'll copy and paste from time to time. Except on the bottom keyboard, I usually do function C and function V, which does absolutely nothing but drive me crazy. So there are a lot of things in this world where design kind of drives us crazy. Why should your UI be one of those? You know, they pay a lot of attention to airport signs. They want you to be able to see something and immediately find what you're looking for. They spent a lot of time at the Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam trying to come up with the right fonts to use, the right sizes to use. They're not varying the fonts, and they're trying to use some very obvious arrows and icons and colors. Maybe you have some problems with this, but some people like it. But the key here is that they spent some time worrying about it, and I think so should you. Donald A. Norman is one of my favorite authors. He deals more with human interaction design, so he doesn't necessarily deal with software directly, but most of the things that he talks about you can apply to our software. Has anyone ever seen the Caramel teapot?
Oh my God.
So this is Caramel is I believe he's from France, and he came up with some designs that were completely unusable, and this is one of them. So you might argue, well, this might be beautiful, it might be a nice color, it might look really nice, but we wouldn't be able to use this because it's not designed for us to interact with. I think one of his other items was the electric plug-in hammer. Just a hammer with a cord on it. Has anyone here ever built the form? Did I take a screenshot of your app, maybe? So I've done the same thing before. You know, when this technology came out, it was really awesome. We could kind of click and drag and create our own labels and our boxes and our buttons, and it was great. But then we started getting things like this, which I find really unusable. There's probably some fields on here that we never change, but happen to be mixed in with some fields that we often change. If I was looking for one particular piece of information, there's nothing here that distinguishes what I'm looking for. So this is an example of what I hope we don't build. You know, we have a lot of patterns that we expect. From using our computers, we kind of expect things to work a certain way. We have the ability to create software that doesn't work that way, but we shouldn't take advantage of that. We should probably stick to patterns that not only we expect, but that our users are going to expect. This came from, this was Windows Service, actually. For those of you that know about server rooms, when this pops up, you're usually not at the computer to select the right answer. In this case, I think the answer was yes, but I forgot which one it was because there's no label on this. The same company, actually, when I first started tinkering with the software, I kept filling in data on a form, and I hit OK. But when I went back into that form, my data wasn't updated. And they told me, oh, well, there's your problem. You hit OK. You should have hit Apply, Cancel. So, the way my computer's configured, if I hit OK, it saves and closes the window. If I hit Cancel, it just closes the window. And if I hit Apply, it saves without closing the window. In this case, we had software where Apply and Cancel did something completely different than what OK did. And that made it hard to use. Also, going back to that one, actually. Has anyone ever seen the cancel OK pattern? I've seen that a few times on the online Scrum board we're using. I'm not sure if it's always been like this, but now it switched to a cancel OK. So I'm entering in stories and acceptance criteria, and then I hit cancel, wonder why it didn't show up on the whiteboard, and then realize what happened, and I have to go back in.
Maybe mistaken. I think I remember one changed it. It would move them back and forth, so you actually thought about what you were saying and not just.
That could be it. That could be it, because we kind of get into that mode where something will pop up and we say, yeah, okay. Does that say something about deleting everything from my hard drive and contacting my mother and telling me how bad a software developer I was? Maybe. I'm not making these up either. And if you have any of these that deserve to be in this Hall of Fame, you should send them to me because I get a kick out of this. The password login construct is one that actually did come up. I was expecting login passwords. This is usually when somebody walks up behind me and sees me type this in and goes, isn't that the password you use on your other accounts? And I say, yes, I understand. This particular piece of software, you could have multiple users with the same login name. You got logged in as a different user depending on what password you entered. Somebody thought that was a good idea, and we decided we'd correct that. So I guess we can call all of these things UX smells, UI smells. These are the things you also need to be aware of as you're putting together your software. There's a book, Set Phasers on Stun, I wanted to point out. This has a lot of interesting stories on design failures. The author, by the way, is Stephen Casey, C-A-S-E-Y. One of the opening stories that he has is all about the Therac 25, which was a state-of-the-art radiation system to treat cancer patients. there are two different modes that they had on this software. One was kind of a high mode, where it shot 25,000 rads of radiation. And then there was a low mode, which shot 200 rads. Difference is when they had the high level, they'd swing a metal plate into place. That would actually absorb most of the laser radiation and convert it into X-rays, which are much safer. When they put together this application, though, they didn't find a particular way that users might interact with it. User was actually able to get it into a mode where it was shooting on high with that metal plate not being in place. By the way, the control room was in a different part and they didn't have visibility into the actual treatment room. So all that the operator saw when they shot 25,000 rads of radiation into a patient was some malfunction error. So they tried to shoot it again, and in the experience in the treatment room, they said it was a lot less exciting. They talked about blue flashes and searing pain, and some people died because of this software error. And so that's where the title of this book came from. The quote is, "Captain Kirk forgot to set phasers on stun." And so I just added this in here. This is from a different presentation I do on design. But after I saw Rebecca and Stephen presenting on specification by example, I thought it's pretty appropriate. A lot of times you're trying to present some information to someone, and you have a choice between unstructured and structured data. In this case, unstructured gets the information to you, but maybe not in the best way it could. So yeah, we're confirmed on United Airlines Flight 2049, departing from Washington Dulles Airport, and arriving in Seattle, which is great. But as a user, I'm probably only looking for specific pieces of that information. So we're used to seeing structured data like this. As we're putting together these UIs, we want to bring the user's attention to the pieces that matter. So putting it all together, do we have any mobile app developers here? A few. So I just started getting into the whole mobile app development business. And so I've gone through the Microsoft certification process for Windows 8 and Windows Phone. And so they're paying attention more to a lot of these different UI constructs. They want to make sure that the software you give is going to work in all these different environments. They want to make sure that we're following all these specific patterns. The Windows 8 specification, for instance, wants you to follow certain touch gestures and make sure that your application supports those different gestures. The idea being that anybody who's familiar with the operating system can use any of the apps that they allow on that operating system. So I think if you adhere to these principles, you're going to find going through these certification processes, whether it be for mobile app submission, be it for your bosses, be it for yourself, I think you have the ability to create so much better code. So we talked about set phasers on stun, but there's a few other items I can give you, which I would add to the reading list of great ways to learn. Clean Code. It's by Uncle Bob and Robert C. Martin. This talks a lot about the code smells that we've been talking about, how to identify those. The Design of Everyday Things by Donald A. Norman. I think a lot of people have read this book and love this book. Again, it's not about software in particular, but a lot of the principles are applicable to what we do. Designing with the Mind in Mind by Jeff Johnson. This deals more with human perception in the design aspects of what we do, how we might perceive different types of UI and some constructs that will help us make ours clearer to understand. Last one I know is completely impossible to read. I decided to make a bigger version of that, which is still going to be completely impossible to read. This is a clean code cheat sheet, and it's written by Urs Enzler, E-N-Z-L-E-R. He has this clean code cheat sheet, which lists a lot of the best practices for code. and some of the code smells. He also has a test-driven development cheat sheet, which is very similar. I actually printed this out on 11 by 17, and I put the test-driven development sheet on the other side of that, which I like to keep around just in case I need it for reference. So, my goal again is to make sure that the code that we're writing is always going to be great code. But I guess we can't always expect that the code is going to be perfect. What happens if you get stuck with some code that isn't tested or doesn't meet the standards? So Michael Feathers said a lot of different things. What do you think about when you hear about the term legacy code? One of the descriptions used is the sort of code that you just wish would die. And Roberto Hernandez is going to come up next, and he's going to tell you a bit about how we deal with legacy code and how we get to a point where it fits into our Agile engineering processes. So again, I'm Ed Buhain, and I hope you all become better coders.